Most of us dream of enjoying a happy, stress-free retirement. Then we wake up with one stressful question in mind: how much will it cost? Hello, I'm Wes Wood, the Income Guy, and founder and president of Wood Financial Group. And for nearly 20 years, I specialize in helping hardworking Tennesseans just like you reach their retirement goals through income-based financial strategies. So if you're looking for the right solutions to achieve your own financial goals, reach out to me. I can help. Call me at 855-776-0614 or go to retiretv.com during today's show or at any time. All right, so have you ever gone to a baseball game or taken a trip without figuring out how much it's going to cost first? Probably not, because of course you want to feel confident that you can afford it. And the same goes for retirement. So it's important to try to answer that question that keeps you up at night: how much is my retirement going to cost me? And unfortunately, there's no one-size-fits-all answer, but there are some steps that you can take to determine the answer that's right for you. And today, I'm going to talk about that and a lot more. We're going to cover not only how to calculate your income needs from the top down, but 3 important factors to consider next, and why it's even more of an important question of how much will it cost to retire is, do I have the right strategy? And as always, Dave Scranton is going to join me on today's show. Dave is an investing for income specialist with well over 30 years of experience. He's also a best-selling author and television host. But before we welcome Dave and talk to him, let's look at a good way to calculate generally how much you're going to need to retire. So let's get back to that baseball game. Think about how you might estimate those expenses. Most likely you're going to add up costs that you know of, like your tickets, your parking, food, maybe you buy some souvenirs and other matters. And that approach is logical and fine for that baseball game. And a camping trip, and perhaps some other things. But think about it. Is it really the best approach when it comes to calculating the cost of your retirement? And in my experience, the answer is no. And the main reason is this: you're going to miss some stuff. Most likely you'll overlook and underestimate a lot of the things when trying to calculate over 30 years of retirement expenses in the same way that you would do on just the day to go to a ballpark. A better approach for retirement is do what we call the top-down financial analysis. In other words, instead of adding up all your expected retirement expenses and identifying the expenses you expect to go away, then subtract those from your current gross income. For example, say you have $100,000 a year of income, gross income. You can figure out how much of that is going towards your 401k and subtract that. Then you can subtract things like your FICA tax that comes out of your paycheck. And if you have some perhaps debt that's going to go away when you retire, for instance, your mortgage, you can subtract that as well when you retire. And the point is that once you've done this top-down approach, you're left with the bottom line number that gives you an idea of how much income you're going to need. You'll know what current level of income feels like. So by subtracting all the expenses you're not going to carry in retirement, you get an idea about how much the same lifestyle will cost after you retire. And from my experience, often it's a pleasant surprise. For example, you might find that $100,000 a year you're making now can be reduced to perhaps $70,000 of pre-tax income with no negative impact to your lifestyle. So now, is it simply a matter of determining how much money you need to save in order to generate $70,000 a year? Not quite, and I'm going to explain that in just a moment. But first, here's your chance to learn more right now. Visit me at retiretv.com or by calling 855-776-0614 to receive your free retirement income kit. But now, let's welcome David Scranton. David is the founder of Sound Income Strategies and the Retirement Income Store. Hey Dave, thanks for joining me again today.
Of course, Wes, it's my pleasure as usual. When you were giving that analogy before whereby 100,000 pre-tax, pre-retirement income could really be the same as 70,000 pre-tax, post-retirement income, some of the expenses you were talking about were after-tax expenses and some were pre-tax expenses. So you might want to explain just a little bit about how you divide those up, because it makes a mathematical difference, right?
It does, because we're looking at some expenses you pay with post-tax dollars and some you pay with pre-tax dollars. So there's some of those post-tax dollars expenses that you may have while you're working before you retire. We're going to need to gross up some. For example, a mortgage. If you're carrying a mortgage into retirement, in a mortgage, it's a good example because some of that expense that you're paying every single month is tax deductible, so you can take that off the top line, whereas some of it is post-tax where you're not going to get a deduction, so you're going to need to gross up that post-tax portion. Also, FICA tax is another example. You actually pay FICA taxes with post-tax dollars, so you'll probably need to gross that up a little bit for expenses. Also, if you're going to have things like credit cards paid off, or perhaps a car note, or maybe you're sticking away, let's just say $700 a month into a credit union or a checking or savings account, you're going to want to gross that up as well. So perhaps if you're spending, let's say, or putting $800 away into a savings account, you may want to gross that up to, let's say, $1,000. So it's a little bit more complicated than just what I mentioned earlier.
Yeah, if you think about it, the only things that are really pre-tax oftentimes are your interest and property tax on your home, except your property tax doesn't go away. That stays forever and goes up over time. And also your 401k contributions. All these other things are after tax. So what a lot of people probably don't realize is that when you gross those up and figure out how much pre-tax income it takes you, once you've then paid taxes and then paid these expenses, a lot of times people might be surprised to find that, yeah, I think I'm spending $100,000 pre-tax, but maybe I'm only spending 60 or 70. And of course, that's a big relief. But then the next step is to build it back up again. The next step is for people to realize that they didn't retire to sit home on their hands. There's extra expenses that are now going to get added back on in retirement. So it's kind of like a quick relief, then all of a sudden, boom, here's the other stuff that you have to account for.
Right, exactly. But yeah, definitely the top down, you're going to capture a lot more of your need for income. What I've noticed is that people that try to do the bottom up approach are going to miss a lot of things, unless I have a lot of clients that are very engineering, love spreadsheets, and they can add everything up and tell you almost to the nickel how much income they need in order to meet all their expenses, plus the other things that they want to do in retirement. Yeah. But if you're like most people, most of my clients, it's better to use that top-down approach. But hey, stay with us, Dave. We'll talk more in just a bit. Coming up after the break, I'm going to identify 3 more steps to help you determine how much your retirement will cost.